In this video, we'll learn the fundamentals of sheets in Tableau. We'll also create a very simple bar graph. So in Tableau, one sheet represents one visualization or one graph. So if you want to create multiple graphs, then you will have to add multiple sheets using the Add Worksheet icon over here. A sheet is usually divided into three main areas. The left side here, which includes your variables that come from the data set or the file you connect to using the Tableau data source. Tableau is smart enough to recognize the data type of your variables. So for example here, all numerical variables that you can analyze are categorized under the measure category here. This includes things like sales, profit, age, any numerical variable that you can run analysis on it. Then any textual or string data or categorical data is grouped under the dimensions area over here. And Tableau is smart enough to understand geographic data types such as cities, postal codes, states, and those are used to draw things like maps, for example. In addition, Tableau is smart enough to recognize numerical data that cannot be analyzed, such as order number, customer ID. They're also added under dimensions because they're not really an analyzable measure. And then the next area over here includes filters and marks. These are additional information that you add to your graph that you will create in this area, white area over here. And then on top of that, you will have an area for columns and rows. These areas represent your X and Y axis that you will need to have in your graphs, depending on the graph you will create. So first, let's start with a simple bar graph. For this graph, we're going to try to create a graph that represents sales by regions. So the sales variable is over here, and sales are going to be in the rows area because the sum of sales are usually in the rows axis. So right now, by default, Tableau uses the sum measure, which you can change to whatever you're interested in, like the minimum sale, the maximum, the average, whatever you're interested in. But for this example, we're actually interested in the sum of sales, which is the default measure that Tableau chose for us. But right now, we only have one bar because we have not chosen a variable that categorizes our sales by region. To do that, we need a dimension. In this case, it's the region variable. So we can drag it to the columns area. And then Tableau recognizes all the unique areas that we have or regions that we have in our data set. In this example is 4. And then creates one bar for each region. Now, if you highlight the area, you will get the total sales or the sum of sales for that region, but you don't have an exact number written on top of the bar. This is where marks becomes handy. So if you want to add more information to our graphs, we have to use marks. Now, labels represent textual data that we want to add. So in this example, I'm going to drag the sales into labels, and that means my sum of sales will be represented as textual data on top of my bar. Now I can change it to whatever measure I'm interested in, such as average or median. But in this example, I'm going to keep it to sum as well. On top of that, you can change your scale, your increment scale. So for example, if you don't want it to increase by 200K, you can change that by double clicking on the axis. And then here you can change your range and your tick marks using the fixed option. So let's keep it to default. right now and go back out to our bar graph. So in addition, I want to represent my bars in terms of colors. That means the darker the shade, the more the sales. In this example, I will have to use the color mark to add extra information to my graph. I still need to use the sales, sum of sales, to draw those colors. So I'm going to have to drag the sales into the color mark here. By default, Tableau chooses a color shade for me, and it's light blue to dark blue. I can always go back and change it. The only thing you have to do is go back to the colors and change it. Click Edit Colors, and then choose your color grade. In sales or profit situation, usually people would want to use something like red to green, and then that will make the lowest red, because Tableau also chose the lowest number as my smallest number or smallest shade. I can go to the advanced area and choose my starting number. I can make it 0, for example, and apply, and that will make the 1.5 million slightly green or light green, no longer red. Or I can just keep it to default. I can also change the title of my sheet, which is by default the name of the sheet you have created. So I'm going to create or change the name from sheet 1 to something like sales by region, for example. I can change its font size, bold it, change the color, apply it, and then if I like it, I can keep it as well. On top of that, I can maybe add more information. For example, maybe I also want to show the profit as label or as textual data on top of the bar. So I can drag it and drop it on the label area, and that will include both the profit and the sales as textual information. Now, if I want to add filters so I can allow my user to select and deselect some of the regions, I can use the filter area here and choose a variable that allows me to filter my data. So in this example, because I'm using the region variable, I can also use it as a filter variable. So I can drag the region variable over here and drag it all the way to the filter box. You can choose your default selected regions. I'm going to keep it to all of them and apply. Now I want my filters to show in this area here, which will allow me at a later stage to show it in the dashboard. By default, Tableau does not show the filter, so you have to go to the options and click Show Filter. This will make it shown in the right side. Now you can also change the way it's represented. By default, it's multiple values list. I can make it multiple values drop down. That will save me some space, especially if I have a filter that has many options, like states, for example. I don't want a very long list, so using a drop down will make it much more practical. And I can deselect and select areas and see the changes live on my graph. So this is pretty much it for bar graphs and simple sheets building. And then we'll talk about more advanced stuff in the next videos.